Good evening, everybody. My name is Richard Ring. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Collections and Interpretation here at the Rhode Island Historical Society. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program, the Providence Steam Roller, New England's first NFL team, with author Greg Tranter. Before I begin introduce tonight's speaker, I want to share an upcoming program that might be of interest. On Thursday, October 24th, 6 p.m. Oh, my glasses are going to read. We will welcome metalsmith and collector Sarah Nahama for a talk on the history of mourning jewelry. That's M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, mourning jewelry. Nahama will give an overview history of mourning jewelry by examining its style, symbolism, and materials. We'll highlight pieces connected to Rhode Island and New England and discuss its range of memorializing from everything from political and public figures to friends and family. This program is in collaboration with Providence's North Burial Ground. Those interested can register at rhs.org. So now for this evening's program. Greg Tranter is a sports historian, curator, and author with specialized expertise in Buffalo Bills history. He's authored 6 books on professional sports history and writes for 3 magazines. He is assistant executive director of the Pro Football Researchers Association and the editor-in-chief of the Coffin Corner magazine. Please join me in welcoming Greg Tranter.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here tonight. So I thought I would wear a steamroller hoodie, trying to follow the fashion of Bill Belichick as best I can, except I didn't cut off the sleeves. So anyway, I want to thank the Rhode Island Historical Society for the opportunity tonight, especially Connor, who helped organize it. Really appreciate it. I'd also really like to say a special thank you to the staff at the Mary Robinson Research Center for really making this book possible. Special thanks to Jennifer Galpern, Dana Signey Monroe, and Leah Schoberth. Without their help and support, this book would not have come together. I also want to thank J.D. McKay, who helped take a bunch of images from the collection here, and you'll see some of them in the book for sure. So just a real shout out for the Rhode Island Historical Society. So thanks everybody that was involved. One more thank you. I'd like to thank Doug Stark, who is here tonight. Doug helped generate the idea for this book. The book came about, actually, the idea in the summer of 2021. I was volunteering at the International Tennis Hall of Fame in Newport, and Doug, who's a friend and a colleague, at the time was the executive director there. And we were chatting about sports one day, and he said, hey, do you know why the steamroller name is used by so many different pro sports teams in Providence history? 6 altogether. Of course, I didn't know. I knew a little about the Providence football team, but not a lot. So I started researching, and the more research I did, the more enthralling and interesting the story became. And so after 18 months of research and 3 years with the publisher in the middle there, the book is published. So anyway, a shout out for Doug, who's here tonight. So now let me take you back to 1925. At the time, Providence was the 20th largest city in the United States and one of the wealthiest. It had been one of the first cities in the country to industrialize. It was known for its textile manufacturing, jewelry, silverware, and precision toolmaking. Companies like Gorham Manufacturing, Nicholson File, Fruit of the Loom, Corliss Steam Engine, all called the city its home. It seemed like a natural fit for the National Football League, especially as the league was moving into bigger cities and more prosperous cities. Providence officially joined the NFL on August 1st, 1925, to begin play that fall. The franchise fee was $500. The NFL at the time consisted of 20 teams in that season. The Steamroller were one of 6 northeastern cities. They were joined by the expansion New York Giants, the Buffalo Bisons, Rochester Jeffersons, Pottsville Maroons, and the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. The Steamroller, though, was not your ordinary NFL expansion team. 13 players from the 1924 Providence independent professional team helped solidify the roster. The Providence football team had actually been founded 9 years before joining the NFL in 1916 and had been playing high quality independent professional football. Providence's first NFL game, which is featured on this program, was a preseason contest against the non-NFL club. They played the West Point Artillery, and Providence literally rolled them 127-0. So how did the team come about? Charles Coffin, on the left, was the sports editor of the Providence Journal. He founded the team in 1916 after Pierce B. Johnson, who wrote schoolboy sports for the paper, suggested the idea to him after Johnson had seen a couple semi-pro teams play, and he thought after 3,000 or 4,000 people came to those games, wow, if we got a team in Providence, people I think would be interested in it. So Coffin owned the team, he managed the team. Johnson became the publicity guy and also was the assistant general manager. Coffin also brought two other important people into the ownership group. One was James Dooley, an attorney for the club. He was also a local judge and a state legislator. And he ultimately ended up building two stadiums, the Cycledrome, which is where the Steamroller played during their NFL years, and Kinsley Park, where the independent pro team played prior to joining the NFL. Providence's first game in 1916 as a pro team was September 30th, and it was a 14-0 victory over Fort Adams of Newport, Rhode Island. But how did the team get its nickname, Steamroller? It came about completely by accident. At one of the team's early games, Coffin, while standing in a concession line, overheard a fan saying to another fan, "Wow, they're getting steamrolled." He heard it, loved it, and decided steamroller, but not plural, singular. They were the first NFL team to be a singular nickname. And he was adamant that it be singular because we're steamrolling other teams. The independent pro team continually upgraded its schedule. And by 1923 and 1924, it was considered among the top teams in the East. In 1923, the team sported an overall 12-1 record and allowed only 19 points. In 1924, the team played a much tougher schedule because it added 6 NFL teams to its schedule, anticipating that it was going to join the NFL in 1925. They finished with a 12-3-1 overall record and were considered the mythical Eastern Independent Professional Champions of Football. Providence actually went 3-2-1 against the 6 NFL teams. They defeated the Rochester Jeffersons, the Minneapolis Marines, and the Dayton Triangles. Their 2 losses came at the hands of the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, who finished 3rd in the NFL with an 11-2-1 record. The Cycledrome in Providence was the home of the Steamroller in 1925 and throughout its NFL existence. The 12,000-seat stadium shown here opened on June 2nd, 1925 as a bicycle track. At the time, it was the largest bicycle track in the United States. It was considered a state-of-the-art facility when it opened, and because it was a bike track, the fans sat very close to the action, giving Providence a distinct home field advantage. There were places on the field where if the player was tackled out of bounds, they were tackled into the stands. The chief financier and owner was Steamroller part owner, Peter Laudati. But because it was built for cycling, the 100-yard field just fit inside the track, and there was not enough room for 10-yard end zones. So the end zones were only 5 yards deep because of the bank of the track.
Where is this located?
The Cycledrome was located on the Providence Pawtucket line. The primary reason it was put there is the train ran there. And so it was easy to get to back before there weren't a lot of cars going around. So that's where it was located.
Right off North Main.
Yes, right off North Main. Yep. NFL rules in 1925 were also a little bit different. So for example, a pass into the end zone was a turnover and the other team got it if it was incomplete. So if you didn't score a touchdown, it was incomplete, the other team got the ball. Following a touchdown or a score of any kind, field goal, touchdown, the team that scored could choose to receive the ensuing kickoff. The reason for that is it was very much a game of field position and punting. And so you didn't necessarily want to receive the ball because then you'd have to drive 80 yards or 70 yards or 90 yards. If you actually kicked off and stopped them, they'd punt you and you'd get the ball closer to midfield. And so you'd have a much better chance of scoring. So it was very much a field position game, but what it did allow, and Providence took advantage of it a few times, it did allow, if you were trailing in the fourth quarter, you scored a touchdown, you could get the ball back and score another one. It was more, it was easier to come back, if you will. So anyway, that was, and we'll get more into the Cycledrome, some of the things that happened there as the talk goes on. The first regular season NFL game played at the Cycledrome was versus the expansion Giants on October 11th, 1925. 99 years ago tomorrow was the first game at the Cycledrome. As the Providence Journal described it, quote, an assemblage of 7,500 dyed-in-the-wool football enthusiasts watched the Steamroller, led by Coach Archie Golombeski, former Holy Cross luminary, ride to a brilliant 14-0 victory over the New York Giants, end quote. The first NFL touchdown in Cycledrome history came on a blocked Jim Thorpe punt. Yep, Hall of Famer Jim Thorpe had a punt blocked by Providence by former Brown standout, and Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, John Spellman. And Franny Stretch Garvey fell on the football in the end zone for the touchdown. An even more exciting play produced the Steamroller's second touchdown, a 92-yard kickoff return by the 5'8" Cy Wentworth, a former University of New Hampshire standout. The win over the Giants was actually the team's second NFL victory. They opened the season with 2 road games, and the Steamroller defeated the Pottsville Maroons on October 4th at Minersville Park for their first NFL victory. Dartmouth star Red Maloney scored the first touchdown on a fumble recovery in the end zone for the 6-0 victory. That loss would cost the Maroons the NFL championship as they finished with a 10-2 record and in second place. Providence finished their first season 10th in the 20-team NFL with a 6-5-1 record. But the highlight of the 1925 season was the Steamroller hosting the first NFL game ever played in Boston. It was played at Braves Field, home of the National Baseball League's Boston Braves, on December 9th. If you know where BU Field is today, that's where Boston Braves Field was back then. Providence played the Red Grange-led Chicago Bears. It was the 7th game in Grange's first barnstorming tour. Prior to the game, Grange met with Joseph P. Kennedy, who owned a film company, and the two would be working together to create a film about Grange. At that time, Joe's sons, JFK was 8 and Bobby was 3 weeks old. While on the sideline at the same game, pregame, Grange was visited by none other than the Sultan of SWAT, Babe Ruth. The two superstars chatted for several minutes prior to the game. At that time, they were the two biggest names in sports. But in a hard-fought contest, on a frigid day in Meadtown, played in front of 18,000 fans, the Steamroller prevailed in a stunning upset, 9-6. They scored on a safety by Maloney and Franny Garvey's 30-yard return of a bad center snap for a touchdown. Grange was credited with only 13 yards rushing on 5 carries. He returned 1 punt for 8 yards, threw 3 passes, and forced a Providence fumble. It was Chicago's first loss since Grange had joined the team. He was booed by some of the fans as they had expected much more from the superstar. Providence had strengthened its team for the game, adding future Hall of Famer Fritz Pollard, who's on your right, and 2 of the Notre Dame Four Horsemen, Jim Crowley and Don Miller, though none played a pivotal role in the outcome. Former NFL player Jim Laird was named head coach, replacing Golembeski for 1926. Laird only lasted 1 season in Providence, as the team finished with a losing record, 5-7-1, after starting out with a 4-1 record. They finished 11th in the 22-team league. However, there was some excitement that year. Running back Curly Oden from Brown, shown here, scored 10 touchdowns for Providence, led the NFL, and was named second-team All-Pro. The highlight of the Steamroller season were back-to-back victories over 2 undefeated teams, Pottsville and Frankfurt. It was the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets' only loss of the season, as they went on to win the 1926 NFL championship. Following that season, though, NFL football was not doing well, and it downsized to only 12 teams remained for 1927. Providence, though, took advantage of that. The Detroit Panthers were one of the teams that folded. That provided star quarterback Jimmy Konzelman, shown here, who was also named the team's head coach. And with him, he brought several other quality Panther players, including Digger Doan, Jack Fleischman, Al Haddon, and a guy named Gus Sonnenberg. Konzelman was paid $292 per game to both play and coach. That was considered a significant sum at the time. Most players were paid $50 or $100 to play each week. And of course, there were no guaranteed contracts. The Roller also added 1925 Washington University All-American George Wildcat Wilson, who some considered on par with Red Grange. The Roller again defeated Grange. This time, he was playing for the New York Yankees football team. The game was the first NFL game played at Archbold Stadium in Syracuse, New York, with Providence winning 9-0 in front of 5,000. The Steamroller finished the 1928 season on a 3-game win streak, and they ended with an 8-5-1 record. It was the franchise's best to that point, and it boded well for 1928. Konzelman and Wilson led the team with 4 touchdowns each, but it was the defense that made the difference, led by first-team All-Pros Fleischman, Sonnenberg, Joe Kozlowski, and Curly Oden. They only allowed 2 teams to score more than a single touchdown, and the Roller compiled 6 shutouts. The 1928 season became the season to remember for all Steamroller fans. The team added Duke Haney, UConn star Pop Williams, and All-Pros Milt Rehnquist and Clyde Smith to an already solid roster. In addition, they added a player named Perry Jackson, but it wasn't the real Perry Jackson. Konzelman had heard he was an outstanding lineman and cabled a tryout offer. At the time, Jackson was ill and was in no condition to play football. So he told his college teammate, Arnie Shockley, to go in his place. So Shockley did, under Jackson's name, and he made the team. He played for the Roller for 3 seasons, all under an assumed name. When Jackson was well again, he tried out for the Roller. He didn't make the team. He tried out under Shockley's name. Though he did play the 1929 season with the Boston Bulldogs as Shockley. Now, it was somewhat, there was people that, like, there was college players that played with assumed names and they would go play for a week or two, but never taking over someone's identity. So I think Providence was the first team to do that. The Steamroller split their first 2 games of the 1928 season. They defeated the Yankees behind 2 Pop Williams touchdowns, and then lost a hard-fought contest at the Cycledrome to Frankfurt, 10-6, as the Yellow Jackets scored all their points in the 4th quarter. The Roller then reeled off 4 straight victories, including wins over the Triangles, the Maroons, and the Detroit Wolverines, who were led by future Hall of Famer Benny Friedman. They also defeated the Yankees 12-6 in their first ever visit to the house that Ruth built, Yankee Stadium. However, Konzelman was lost to the team for the remainder of the season with a knee injury, though he still coached the team. On the trip back home to Providence, on the New York to Providence steamer, so they went by boat, the team was in a joyful mood and had a good time partying. Till about 2 a.m. when an alarm rang out, man overboard. Yep, a steamroller player had either fallen or jumped after having spent most of the evening at the bar. Luckily, the unnamed player was rescued, being the only recorded rescue by the Providence to New York steamer in its history. When the steamer docked, nobody said who the player was, and Konzelman was off to the hospital for surgery. Providence sported a 5-1 NFL record when they prepared to face off against the Yellow Jackets in a home-and-home weekend series. So they were playing November 17th in Frankfurt and November 18th in Providence. Imagine that today, back-to-back games. Frankfurt came in with a 7-1-1 record. Providence was 5-1. It was a battle for first place. The Yellow Jackets were led by Ken Mercer, Wally Deal, and Hugh Stockton. The first game at Frankfurt Stadium drew 15,000 fans were shoehorned in. The Jackets led 6-0 late in the 4th quarter when Wildcat Wilson took over. He carried the ball on 7 of 8 plays and smashed over from the 3-yard line to tie the game. Curly Oden just missed the extra point by less than a foot, and the game ended in a 6-6 tie. Frankfurt didn't like the officiating and filed the first protest in NFL history. However, it was quickly denied. The 2 combatants were added again the next day at the Cycledrome with 12,000 on hand. Providence scored midway through the 1st quarter on a perfectly executed pass play from Wilson to Oden for a 46-yard touchdown. The Steamroller defense, led by Sonnenberg, made that single touchdown stand up. The Providence Journal reported the next day, quote, "The Providence Steamroller scored the most notable victory in their colorful career when they defeated their greatest rivals, the powerful Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, 6-0, to take undisputed possession of first place in the NFL for the first time since they entered the circuit in 1925, end quote. The following week, in front of a record-breaking crowd of over 13,000 at the Cycledrome, the Steamroller defeated the New York Giants 16-0 behind former Boston College star Jack Cronin's 2 touchdowns. Providence then defeated Pottsville on Thanksgiving 7-0, with Cronin scoring again. And that victory set up the chance for the Steamroller to win the NFL championship if they could either defeat or tie the Green Bay Packers on the last day of the season. However, 2 days before the game, the Steamroller family was struck by tragedy. Carolyn Johnson, mother of Providence Assistant General Manager Pierce Johnson, was tragically struck and killed by a streetcar while walking to the grocery store. Mrs. Johnson was a quasi-mother to many of the steamroller players, as 7 of them lived with the Johnsons, and she took care of them, fed them, did all their laundry, made sure they were ready to play football. The team was devastated. A cloud hung over the game at the Cycledrome, but Providence knew they at least needed a tie to secure the title. Green Bay led 7-0 late in the third quarter when Wildcat Wilson led a 72-yard scoring march for the Steamroller and finished it off with a 23-yard scoring strike to Odin. And Sonnenberg's all-important extra point kick was good, and the game was tied 7-7. Providence held off the Packers the rest of the game, and when the gun sounded, the Providence Steamroller were NFL champions. And the fans refused to leave the Cycledrome while the team celebrated on the field like a bunch of schoolboys. The Roller became the first New England team to win the NFL championship. The next day, with 7 Providence players as pallbearers, Mrs. Johnson was laid to rest. And then 2 days later, the team celebrated their championship at the Providence Biltmore Hotel, and each player received a championship watch, as you see there. Konzelman was named the team MVP. Pierce Johnson had not attended the game on Sunday, as he was at the funeral parlor, and he did not attend the championship celebration either. Going into the 1929 season, the Steamroller lost some critical players off their championship team. Sonnenberg, who brought nastiness to the roller defense, retired after winning the World Wrestling Championship to further pursue his wrestling career, where, believe it or not, he could make a lot more money wrestling than he could playing pro football. Also, Clyde Smith, Jim Laird, and Jim Simmons called it quits, and Konzelman suffered from his knee injury, only played 9 games, and was a shell of the player that he was before. University of Pittsburgh star Gibby Welch signed with the Steamroller for their biggest offseason acquisition. He was the best college quarterback in football at that time. Providence ended up with a disappointing season after starting with a 41-0 opening day victory over the Dayton Triangles. They lost 5 consecutive games in the middle of the season and finished with a 4-6-2 mark, 7th place in the 12-team league. The Steamroller did accomplish an NFL record that still stands today, and they also accomplished an NFL first. Providence played 4 NFL games in 6 days, from November 5th to November 10th. No NFL team had ever done it before or since. In the 4 games, the Steamroller won 0, lost 3, and tied 1. But that span of games also included the first ever night game in NFL history on Wednesday, November 6th. However, it was not played at the Cycledrome because there had been heavy rains and the Cycledrome turf was too wet. So they moved the game to Kinsley Park in Providence. It was still a roller home game. The game ended in a 16-0 Chicago Cardinals victory behind the running, passing, and kicking of future Hall of Famer Ernie Nevers, who scored all of the game's 16 points. The game was considered a success, as over 6,000 spectators attended. According to newspaper accounts, the ball had been painted white so that it would be easier to see. One newspaper reporter said about the white ball, quote, "It looked like an egg," and that there was a panicky feeling that the player who made the catch would be splattered with yellow yolk, end quote. On a more positive note, the floodlights were described as being just as good as daylight for the players. Night games began for other NFL teams after this experiment. An interesting side note, according to his 1930 contract with the Steamroller, Tony Latone was paid $125 for all daylight games and 60% of that sum for NFL floodlight games. Pierce Johnson explained that the pay reduction for night games was arranged to help pay for the installation of the floodlights at the Cycledrome. So imagine that today. Okay, Tom Brady, we're gonna take some money. You're only gonna get paid part for playing at night. The Great Depression began in the fall of 1929. And though it had limited impact on the team that year, it would have much bigger impacts in the couple years ahead. Konzelman returned as coach in 1930, but retired as a player. Quite a bit of player turnover occurred again, and some of the key losses included Wildcat Wilson and Gibby Welch. Wilson's dynamic play was severely missed. He joined Sonnenberg and Spellman, going after a wrestling career. Key player additions included Forrest Dowds, Latone, Washington State standout Butch Meeker, and Frosty Peters. The Great Depression forced attendance to fall, with only 2 games drawing 10,000 fans or more. Average attendance dropped to less than 6,500. The Steamroller opened the season with a 27-7 loss to the Giants in front of 12,000 fans. And again, Benny Friedman starred for the Giants. The Roller played 4 more night games, more than any other team. They were 40 years ahead of the NFL adopting Monday Night Football. The Steamroller won their next 4 games, allowing only 2 touchdowns. And then they were shellacked by the Giants again, this time 25-0 in New York. The Steamroller went 2-2-1 over their final 5 games, highlighted by a 3-0 win over the Brooklyn Dodgers, again, the football team. Providence finished with a 6-4-1 record and 5th place in the 11-team league. They also played 4 non-league games to try to raise additional revenue. And then the 1931 season, Ed Robinson, former Brown coach, became the Steamroller's new head coach, replacing Konzelman, who had said he had had enough. Robinson was the first big-time college coach to become the head coach of an NFL team. Attendance fell off precipitously with the lingering effects of the Depression, with over 30% unemployment nationwide. The Roller averaged less than 5,000 fans per game. The Steamroller lost their home opener to the Giants in front of 8,000, which was their largest attendance of the season. The Roller began with a dismal 1-3-2 record. They won 3 in a row, and this is actually a good, you can see how close the fans are to the field. They won 3 in a row before losing the team's final home game, 38-7 against the Packers, with less than 5,000 people. Lee Woodruff scored on a 2-yard run, which was the last NFL touchdown in Steamroller history. The Packers won the NFL title, their 3rd consecutive. The Roller's last NFL game was played at the Polo Grounds against the Giants on November 29th, 1931, before 18,000 fans, and the game ended in a 0-0 tie. Providence played an out-of-league game against the Memphis Tigers on December 13th at Hodges Field in Memphis. Providence won 12-6, and Al Rose scored the last touchdown in Steamroller history on a pass from Dexter Shelley. It was one of 11 non-league games Providence played to try and generate additional revenue to stay alive. They won all 11. The Roller finished the season with a 4-4-3 record, which was good for 6th place, but the NFL only had 10 teams. The Steamroller in 1932 opted out of playing in the NFL and suspended operations for the season, with the lingering effects of the Depression as the primary cause. They chose to field a much less expensive independent pro team. The Steamroller played 2 NFL opponents at the Cycledrome. They defeated the Boston Braves on September 25th in what was considered a major upset because they were no longer an NFL team and they won 9-6. On October 23rd, they played the Chicago Cardinals and lost 7-0. The independent pro rollers finished the season with a 6-3 record, with 7 of the 9 games played at the Cycledrome. In 1933, the Steamroller owners gave their NFL charter back to the league and would no longer pursue an NFL franchise. NFL football in Providence was gone forever. The Steamroller finished their 7 seasons with an NFL record of 41, 32, and 11, a .554 winning percentage, with 1 NFL championship. Including the non-league games they played, their overall record was 64, 32, and 11. The Steamroller won the first NFL championship in New England, and the only one until Tom Brady led the New England Patriots to the Super Bowl championship on February 3rd, 2002. The Providence Steamroller leave a lasting legacy with several NFL firsts and records, including the first New England team in the NFL, the first team with a singular nickname, the first night game played in NFL history, the first NFL game played in Boston, the first NFL game at Archbold Stadium. They were the first NFL team to install their own permanent floodlighting equipment for night games in 1930. The only NFL team to play 4 games in 6 days, and the first NFL team to play their home games at a bicycle track arena. And again, the first New England team to win the NFL championship. And they are the last team to win the NFL championship that the franchise no longer exists. Every team since, the franchise is still in the NFL today. But their real lasting legacy is this quote at the 1928 championship banquet by Rhode Island Attorney General Charles P. Sisson, who said, quote, "The type of football you play may act as a stimulus to college and younger teams football. I think the day is coming when pro football, if it follows the example set by the roller, will take its place with baseball as the great national professional sport," end quote. That was blasphemy in 1928, where football was compared to baseball. And so to me, the roller's legacy is football is where it is today because they followed the lead of the roller. That concludes my talk. I'm happy to take any questions about the team, about how the book came about. There are books for sale. I am selling them for $5 off the retail price today for all of you that came. Happy to sign it. Any questions, comments? Thanks for the
Where was Kingsley Park?
So do you know where Nicholson File used to be? Yeah, so there's, I'm sorry.
Kinsley, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Like downhill.
there's a Neon Markets on the site where the game was, where the field was.
Jim Brown shot.
Yes, yes. Yep, and so that's where the semi-pro, the independent pro team played from 1960 to 25 or 24, and then when the NFL team played at the Cycledrome because they needed to draw, because Kinsley Park only held about 5,000 or 6,000 fans. They needed the bigger stadium at the Cycledrome when they joined the NFL, but because the Cycledrome wasn't available, they ended up playing at Kinsley Park that for the night game.
Go ahead. I was gonna ask, the
night game illumination.
Yeah,
Was that electrical at that point?
yes, and it was floodlights.
Floodlights from the year, wow.
Yeah. And then, but what they did for Kinsley is they brought them in temporarily. And then took them away. In 1930, they put permanent ones in at the Cycledrome.
Yeah,
And the Cycledrome only lasted until 1937. And then it was torn down, and then it became the Lowe's Theater, which was one of the first drive-in movie theaters in the country. I think it was second or third. And it was the first one that had, they didn't call it surround sound, but it had sound that none of the others had. And that was all done by Laudati, who also, built the stadium. And the Lowe's Theater was, I think, running until 78. And it was very, very popular, in the heart of when, during going to the drive-in theater was a big deal. Yeah,
You mentioned that Fritz Carlin played for them, huh? How many games did he play?
so Fritz, so this is an interesting story because so the Akrons, he played for the Akron Pros that season, and their season had ended. And so he was free to go play for another team. Well, Providence had 3 games after the Akron Pros. So he came to Providence, played in those 3 games, and then the following year he went back to play for Akron. And he's in the Hall of Fame. He got in the Hall of Fame in the 2000s. But he was a great player, for sure. Yeah.
So, but what was how did you win the title? So you just had to have the best record? and you-
Oh, yeah, no, great question. So back then, teams played, because the league really didn't control the scheduling. So teams played as many games as they could schedule. And they had to get the other team to agree. And so teams played different numbers of games. So like that season, the Steamroller played 10. Well, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets played like 16. And there was no playoffs until 1932. So what they did is it was the team with the best winning percentage that won. And so when they went into the last game of the season, they had a better winning percentage than Frankfurt. And so they could get in by a win or a tie. And so they tied the Packers, and they still ended up with the best winning percentage. And then Frankfurt ended up losing a game later, so they were further apart than they were when they clinched the championship. But yeah, they went by that. But no, another interesting story in the book is Curly Lambeau, who was the owner of the Packers. They only came to Providence twice because Providence demanded and we never went there because we demanded a certain guarantee, and he wasn't willing to pay the guarantee. But he would come here, but then he wouldn't because we wouldn't pay enough expenses. And so they were all negotiating their own deals about, okay, if you come. So what ended up happening is the best teams could get, that had big draws, could get teams to come to play them. Other teams struggled. So if you go through the NFL standings, you'll see some teams only played like 5 games, 6 games. It's because they didn't have any players that drew well. So because the revenue in those days was all ticket revenue. There wasn't any TV. So you had to sell tickets, which is why the Depression ultimately killed the Steamroller, because their attendance went below 5,000. Well, they're paying what doesn't seem like a lot of money now, but when you're charging $1 or $1.25 for tickets, $292 salary for your best player is a lot of money. So that was the hard part. Yeah.
So all the players obviously had other jobs.
Yes. Yeah, they all worked other jobs. In fact, most of the players were local. The Steamroller had 18 players from Brown that played. Actually, 13 of them were Brown Hall of Famers. They had guys from Holy Cross, Boston College, Boston University, UConn. So it was players that could, get on a train and get here in an hour or two, was primarily it. And then the players that were out of state, like Wildcat Wilson from Washington, they would stay with Mrs. Johnson. Because she had this big house, and so they would put them up because they couldn't afford to stay in a hotel for 8 or 10 week season. So she put them up and treated them great. Yeah.
Was there such a thing as a commissioner of the NFL?
Yeah, Joseph F. Carr was the commissioner. So, he oversaw it, and there were some,
But the teams were still doing their own bickering and negotiating.
Oh, yeah, a lot.
He didn't oversee that.
yeah, and then non-league games were all completely up to the team. So like Providence went out, one year they went out to the Midwest and they played like Minneapolis or something. Well, on the way back, they stopped in Buffalo and played, and then they stopped somewhere else and played. Those were non-league games, but they were all revenue generators. That was
I have two actually.
sure.
One is, at this time, it was all about the college game.
Yes,
And Brown played in
The Rose Bowl.
for his college, was an All-American.
yes.
So what was the the attendance for like Brown football versus the Steamroller?
I didn't do a lot of work on that. I mean, I don't know exactly, whether they drew more than 10 or 12,000. I'm sure the bigger games for Brown, I'm sure they did. On a standard game, they probably didn't. But yeah, I mean, in the 20s, the college game was way superior, really, until Red Grange. He was one that really brought focus on the NFL. And that wasn't until 1926. And even then, it took a while for that to take shape.
Oh, my second question is, the other night, Prescott set an NFL record for being the first quarterback to throw a touchdown on 2 consecutive days. So I'm curious, those 4 games, the Steamroller played back to back.
Yeah.
Do you know if there was a touchdown throw?
Well, there would, that's a good question. Maybe, probably not though, because they lost 3 of the games, which means they didn't score many points. I don't look at how many points they scored, but probably not.
Yeah, I want to know about Conley Stadium. What is the connection there, the Steamroller?
I don't.
There are big plaques at the Mount Pleasant High School Stadium, Conley Stadium, built in the 1920s. There are big plaques about the Steamroller there.
Oh, I don't know.
Used to play Friday nights.
Yeah.
Is that a different steamroller?
As a kid.
I don't know, because it is,
Because there were, so to give you a little, so after the Steamroller went out as the NFL.
Yeah.
They played as an independent team for a few years in the 30s. And then there were leagues they joined. So there was a professional football team, they weren't NFL. In Pierce Johnson from 1937 to like when did the ACFL, the Continental League team, go out? 65. So they had a professional team here that played in various leagues, but they weren't an NFL.
okay, so it was. the Steamroller.
My guess is it's the,
But not these Steamroller.
yeah, my guess is it's the team in the 60s.
But there are plaques that kind of
Yeah,
associate what happened there with
yeah.
these teams.
I think there was a semi-pro team that used the name Steamroller that played there relatively recently.
Yeah.
But they weren't.
Yes.
In the 60s.
Yeah, there was a 60s.
Team that played there.
Okay.
The Steamrollers used to play in the stadium on Friday nights.
But there's also a recent Steamroller.
Right.
Because the Patriots actually played a preseason game at Mount Pleasant back in the 60s. Yeah,
Against that question, I think you just answered it, but it was a power Steamroller team, semi-pro for a long time. And Joe Galino, who won the Heisman Trophy.
yes.
played for it one time.
That's the team that was in the Continental League from 62 to 65.
He's got huge problems.
Yeah,
The other thing is, I read somewhere just recently, Colgate and Brown played in 1932 or 33. Colgate, they both have defeated 33,000 in the Brown Stadium.
Yeah.
Wow.
And one more thing, I knew Curly Odom's son, and he told me something like sports. I don't know if the story is true or not. He told me his father just dropped off the Y in Providence. As soon as the father left, he used to go to the movies.
I can't confirm. What else is in the book though that you may find interesting is, of course, I have a review of each of the seasons. I also do a mini biography on every player that played for the Steamroller. So there is a bio. Some are pretty sparse, but most are reasonable. It's more focused on their football career, like did they play for other NFL teams? Did they play for other pro teams? But I also, if I could find it, I do talk about what their professional career was after football. There's a famous heart surgeon that was in there. Curly Odom, had a good job later. So there was quite a few success stories.
Yeah, Jack Cronin was the football coach for South.
right, for years and years.
Bill Ranquist was his assistant.
Yeah, I think he was also a really good hockey coach too. Yeah. So yeah, that's all in the book too.
According to the internet,
There you go.
October 13th, 1928, Notre Dame beat Navy 7-0. The crowd was 120,000.
Yeah, no, it was, college was definitely the name of the game back in those days. And then the other thing,
I was just, please keep going. I was just gonna say two more questions after
Okay.
you finish.
yeah, no, I was just gonna say that, you know, the NFL, the other thing that happened and Providence kind of fell by the wayside is the NFL in the 30s started to move to big cities, not mid-sized cities. And so Providence really stopped growing at that time, was less wealthy than it was. And now, you know, like the Frankfurt team that's a suburb of Philadelphia. Okay, but it didn't cover Philadelphia. So the NFL really started moving into big league stadiums. But then the other interesting part about football history is even in the 60s and 70s, when there was all these stadiums that were shared between Major League Baseball and the NFL, many of the stadiums were shared, baseball ruled. The NFL had to move, like the Patriots during the World Series in 1967, the Patriots played a home game in San Diego because they had a home game and they couldn't get BC Stadium or BU Stadium, and they moved a home game to San Diego because the Red Sox ruled. You know, because the Patriots were playing at Fenway Parkland.
They still call it a home game.
Yeah, they called it a home game.
Katrina. All the time.
Yeah. But it really wasn't until like the 80s that the NFL really took over, and it's like, yeah, we're not giving up dates in September and October because you have a baseball game. You know, but from the 20s to the 70s, that happened with regularity.
But the A's, the A's and the Rays, the last teams to share a stadium.
One of the last, I don't know if they were the last or not, but certainly one. But you know, you think of that on a metropolitan, now they have to provide 2 stadiums instead of 1 for, you know, 10 NFL games for $1.5 billion or whatever they cost nowadays. Any other questions about the steamroller? If not, you know, thank you so much for, oh yeah.
I was the steamroller, even take the folder. But I went to football league and I didn't.
When they played in the 60s.
Thanks.